Welcome to Early Adopter, the podcast where we help make AI your unfair advantage. I'm Jess, marketing exec by day, AI experimenter by day, night, and basically every other waking moment in between at this point.
And I'm Kyle, your resident tech guru. I've spent the last decade building data systems, products, and AI tools that solve real-world problems. My goal is to cut through the noise and show you how this tech actually works for your business. Each week, we'll break down AI concepts, tools, or trends that actually matter for your business. We'll explain what it is, why you should care, and how to use it without needing a computer science degree.
So whether you're a small business owner, an entrepreneur, or you're just tech curious, grab your coffee, close that tab where you've been staring at ChatGPT for the past 3 weeks wondering what to do with it, and let's dive in. Just think of us as your guides through the wild, wonderful, and sometimes completely overwhelming world of AI.
This is Early Adopter.
Welcome to Early Adopter, the podcast where we help make AI your unfair advantage. I'm Jess.
And I'm Kyle. So, Jess, how was your week?
It's been a little bit of a hectic week. I've got a big proposal that we're working on for a very cool project that I can't really talk about yet. So I've been really busy. But more importantly, I've got a piece of furniture that I ordered back in June, I think, and it's coming from the US, which I've never done that. I've never ordered that big of a thing to be delivered. And so it came by sea container. By sea freight. And I know you've had some experience with shipping stuff internationally.
Expect 4 to 5 months at the least.
Well, that's what I was anticipating. And actually it's been like 3 weeks and I've fallen down the rabbit hole of tracking sea container.
That's kind of cool, actually, that you can see it coming across the ocean.
Exactly. It was a bit like a cozy game where you just sit there and watch it move.
Or
and I've never
seen the people that on the airplane that watch
that's exactly
time. That's just
how
all
do they do
watch
that
the whole time.
Yeah, there's a name for that. It's called raw dogging a flight. I've never actually on my most recent flight I had someone that did that, 10 hours of just watching the plane, which
That's
I
wild.
couldn't I couldn't do. But anyway,
that's kind of serial killer vibes. I'm not gonna lie.
It is a little bit. There was a whole TikTok trend recently where people did that. Anyway, so I've fallen down this weird, unexpected rabbit hole of watching sea freight cross the Atlantic.
Amazing.
Yeah. How's your week?
I mean, look, it was not as exciting as watching sea containers. I'll tell you that.
I feel like I've had a couple of really weird weeks. Or last week I'm talking about cat buses, furry balls. This week I'm talking about watching sea freight cross the Atlantic raw dogging flights. What?
Yeah. Well, for everyone here in the U.S. side of things, this weekend is Labor Day weekend, which is very exciting.
It is
amazing, and we're gonna have some great weather. And I have 3 birthday parties, so
3.
Shout out to all you August, September birthday fellows. But yeah, it should be a fun weekend.
That is a lot of birthday parties. Oh my God.
It's a lot of birthday parties. I'm excited though. I get to go to the beach. I get to do a backyard barbecue. I get to go to dinner. It's all good times.
Nice. Very nice. Well, my other news of the week that actually dovetails nicely into our topic for this week is that I'm almost done with my Python course, which I've been taking for ages. I had to take a couple weeks break in the middle of the summer when I was moving. And for anyone who is not aware, Python is a language that is a coding language, I should say, that is heavily associated with data. And so it actually works very nicely with our topic this week, which is going to be about data for AI and why data is so important. So bear with us, because I know a lot of you are going to hear the term data and immediately your brain switches off, but stick with us because it is actually incredibly important for AI. And
and hopefully you this week you start thinking about data as much as I do in a given week, and I don't
know if anyone would think about data as much as you do in a given week. But I get it. I talk to a lot of small business owners, and a lot of the time when you mention the word data, you can just see people's brains switching off. And I get it. I've been there. I think you sometimes see numbers or hear the word data, and it's just not that interesting because spreadsheets and numbers can be really boring unless you are you. It's a very specific mindset if you find data really interesting. But I think what people don't realize, if you are collecting email addresses for an email list, or if you're tracking your social media engagement, or if you are sending invoices, or even just answering customer questions, that's all data. And
Mhm.
the problem isn't that you don't have data, as in you don't have hard numbers. The problem is that no one's shown you how to actually use the data that you have. And this is where AI becomes a real secret weapon for turning all of that, you know, unusable data, and I'm saying that in quotes for anyone who's
Mhm.
just listening. It's turning that unusable data, or that unusable information, into actual business
Mhm.
insights. So that's why we wanted to cover data in this episode, because it is actually really important. And I also wanted to caveat all of this with the fact that we're going to try really hard not to get jargony. We're going to try not to throw around some acronyms, because with data stuff, it's very easy to get techie or jargony. But if we do slip up, please shout at us on social media or get in touch, and we'll go back and explain things in plain English. And I'll try and do a little bit of a glossary in show notes this week, so that you can easily access some of the terminology that we talk about.
Yeah, and I like to geek out on this stuff. I've not made that a secret, so Jess, definitely keep me honest. Don't let me get too jargony or too,
I will.
technical on this stuff. But I really want to stress what you said, which is, every single business owner, every single entrepreneur, every departmental head, regardless of what you do, whether you realize it or not, you are sitting on an absolute gold mine of data. You just can't see it. My really good friend Dan likes to say every business is now a data business, and he's 1,000% right. So to kind of bring this point home, I think we should bring a baseball analogy.
So first of all, I had a former colleague who always used to say that every business is a data business now. It's absolutely true, because
Mhm.
like even back in the day when you wrote in a ledger book, like physically wrote in a ledger book, that is data. It's just not in the way that
Yeah.
we think of it now. But okay,
Mhm.
what's your baseball analogy?
So in baseball, right, your average viewer looks at the scoreboard and sees hits, runs, and outs by inning. But in baseball, they track everything. So not just hits and runs, but the speed of every pitch, the angle of every swing, how long each at bat takes, even what the weather was like. I mean, if you can record it, a baseball statistician will, right? So every single interaction on the field generates data. Your business is exactly the same. Every email you send, every meeting you have, every invoice you create, every customer service interaction, it's all being tracked somewhere. Now, the caveat being you have to have the tools to do it, but most businesses at this point, with the democratization of SaaS tools, tracks or logs all of this.
Like, I used to work with the New York Yankees with their direct to consumer service, and this is not privileged information, so I'm not sharing anything that I shouldn't be. But I can confirm that baseball fans absolutely love a statistic, and
Mm-hmm.
the Yankees are actually able to do very cool loyalty and engagement stuff with that data for their customers. Like, they have a very engaging loyalty program. They have a really cool reward, like in-app trivia thing that they do.
Mm-hmm.
So all of this is a great example of how the nerd data, the baseball stats, can be used for a business purpose. But I think that's the thing, like most small business owners don't feel like they have access to that sort of information. So like they might have an email list, but I don't think many people consider that data in the traditional sense. But as we've said, it totally is. So the question is then, how do you use that with AI?
Yeah, that's exactly what we're going to try to solve today. Because the thing is, you don't need a massive, perfectly organized database, right? You need to understand what data you have, where it lives, and how to get it in front of AI tools. And every business, no matter how small or large, is generating incredible amounts of information every single day. But you just need to figure out how to access it.
And it's not just obvious stuff like sales numbers, right? Because we're talking about the metadata too, like, when things happen, who was involved, how long it took, like everything
Yeah.
generates data.
And that metadata piece is so interesting and can be really useful. So today we're going to break down the three types of data your business is already creating, showing you how to actually access it from some of your systems. And I think most importantly, how to think about this stuff so you can spot opportunities with AI you never knew existed. So let's start with the basics. For decades, businesses have been really good at tracking one type of information, the stuff that fits neatly into spreadsheets and databases. So sales figures, inventory counts, employee hours, clocking in and out, right? We've built entire industries around organizing, analyzing this structured information.
Right. So like you'll have seen this a million times in any presentation, that's charts, graphs, pivot tables, like all of that sort of thing. Endless spreadsheets, so many spreadsheets.
So many spreadsheets or BI tools as well. So the
Yep.
Power BI tableaus of the world are great at visualizing that structured data. But what's wild about the AI revolution, or what's the big game changer for me, is for the first time ever, we can actually make sense a lot of that messy, unorganized information that businesses create every single day. That's the emails, the meeting notes, the customer calls, stuff that used to just pile up in digital folders or get logged in a structured way, but was never analyzed.
Again, that same former colleague always used to say, we're drowning in data. Like there's almost too much and you just don't know what to do with it. So we're not just talking about adding AI to the data that we've always used. We're talking about unlocking the data that we've never even considered data before. Because again, there's too much data almost. And a lot of it has historically been unusable. So this is really using AI to make that data usable.
That's exactly it. And if you're super technical out there and you're yelling at me right now because you're saying, well, we've been using this for years with machine learning and all that. But I think the difference here is the accessibility of, being able to use that. So, yes, you could use unstructured data in the past with machine learning techniques, but that's way more technical than, even a lot of the stuff we're going to talk about. So it was definitely not accessible to most people unless you had a pretty serious data team.
Exactly.
But there are really three types of data, and each one opens up different possibilities for your business. So I think we want to break them down first. First up is structured data, and that's already what we've been talking about. This is the stuff that lives in neat, organized rows and columns. These are your CRM records, your accounting software, sales reports, your ERP or accounting system, if you have one of those.
So that's like Salesforce, HubSpot, QuickBooks, all of those sorts of things.
Exactly. Most businesses will have a few of these. Larger businesses will have a ridiculous amount of these, right? This is data that is well organized. It's kind of like a filing cabinet. AI can easily analyze it for patterns, forecast trends, spot anomalies, all that type of stuff. If you want to predict next quarter's revenue or figure out which sales rep is most likely to hit their target, structured data is great for that.
But that's not to say that structured data is all that clean, because every business struggles with keeping that information up to date, completely filled in, deduplicated. But that's definitely a discussion for another day because data hygiene is actually incredibly important. So what's our next type of data?
Yeah, the next one is semi-structured data, and I'll kind of compare and contrast this a little bit, but it's kind of the middle step here, which is it has some organization, but it's not as rigid. So we're talking CSVs, which are comma separated values, and I'll talk about that in a sec. Log files. I'm going to use a somewhat technical word here: JSON data, even some spreadsheets. So structured data is think rows, columns, kind of how you envision like a really good Excel, but it sits in a table. Semi-structured is CSVs, where it has a little bit of that structure that you'd expect from a table, but there's additional columns. It's not all quite mapped out and clean.
It's a little messy is probably the word for it. We all have that where your spreadsheet has 50 columns that you've added over time that you don't actually use anymore, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, I think if your spreadsheet has consistent columns and clean data, it's structured. But if it's like most business spreadsheets I've seen with merged cells, random notes all over the place, different formats, then it's probably more in line with semi-structured. AI can work with it, but it would probably need some cleanup first.
I was actually just talking about this with a friend the other day. She has a spreadsheet that someone made for her, and it's got like 1,000 different, very complicated formulas, and it's really useful. It's like her business Bible, but it's a nightmare to keep updated, and you're totally screwed if one of those formulas breaks. Or if you forget to manually update it, like the whole thing isn't useful because it doesn't have the data that it needs.
That's a perfect example of semi-structured data. And your friend is not alone. Almost every single business I go into has this spreadsheet. I think that sales and demand planning is a really good example. It has a bunch of information, has a lot of comments from people within your organization. There's probably some calculations and some transformations happening inside of there. And then probably just has manual adjustments. As soon as you start putting in manual stuff, it moves into that area of being semi-structured. So it's
Yeah.
not, structured and consistent. But AI is actually pretty good at making sense of messy data like that.
So that then brings us to the third type of data, right?
Right. And this is unstructured data. This is the big one. This is the game changer for AI. So this is emails, documents, PDFs, contracts, chat messages, videos, audio recordings and their transcripts. And the real kicker, and where you can start to kind of have that mind blown moment, is anywhere between 80 to 90% of your company data lives in these documents or in these types of data.
And I know that 80% actually sounds like a lot, but that stat comes from Gartner, which is a business and tech research company that a lot of people probably will have heard of. So we promise we didn't make that number up. Like it's
Yeah.
a legit statistic.
I mean, one of my favorite statistics is 80% of statistics are made up,
Oh, yeah, I know that one.
right? But this isn't that. In this case, it really is true.
Yeah.
And if you think about it, every email thread with a client, every Slack conversation with your team, every PDF proposal you've ever sent, every Zoom call recording, and its transcript of 30 minutes of talking or an hour of talking, that's all unstructured data, and it really stacks up. And until recently, it was basically out of reach for businesses to do anything with it at scale.
But that is where LLMs come in, right? Because they can actually
Mhm.
read and understand all of that.
An LLM can read through hundreds of customer support emails and tell you the top 5 complaints. It can analyze sales call transcripts to identify what messaging works best. It can summarize months of project communication to spot why deadlines keep getting missed. Structured data, the rows and columns, is great for forecasting and kind of seeing that trend analysis. Unstructured data is the story behind those numbers, though. So AI converts that story to signals, key themes, sentiment, entities, dates, amounts, whatever.
I think it really addresses what we were saying before about the fact that you've got so much data that you don't think of as data, whether it comes to customer emails or, support conversations or PDFs or whatever. This makes it all usable. And we've all got years of this stuff just sitting around.
Mhm. And like we mentioned, there have definitely been efforts, and there are very sophisticated machine learning techniques that have tried to turn this unstructured data into structured data in the past so you could make sense of it or analyze it. But now we have a really effective means to search it, relate back to it, without having to like convert it, I guess is the way to look at it, and do all of that at scale.
I think it's important to note that you keep using the term at scale because with traditional CRM or other SaaS tools, we could have gone back and looked at the emails and identified issues with a specific project or, why a specific deal fell through, but you wouldn't want to do that on all your deals across all your reps. Like that would just
Mhm.
be too much and more than most people could handle. And I think that just isn't feasible for most startups or smaller businesses, especially because that level of data analysis it's just not feasible. Like enterprise companies are able to do that level of a deep dive because they can afford a serious data team. Your average person who's running a
Mhm.
smaller business or a startup, you you just don't have that level of talent on your team.
Yeah, this is again showing how AI is bringing a lot of those, really expensive enterprise capabilities to, small businesses.
So if businesses are sitting on this gold mine of data, how do they even get it out of all the different systems that it lives in? Because like your CRM talks to your email talks to a calendar, but no one's talking to me. Things don't necessarily pull in real time. Like how do you actually make this usable?
Yeah, no, that's the perfect question. And the reality is most of your data is locked inside of SaaS tools. Your CRM, your
Mhm.
accounting software, your HR platform, your point of sale system, and it's all kind of siloed. So to actually use AI with it, you've got to get it out in some usable format. And there are, well, at least we'll cover today, there are 3 levels of sophistication here.
Everyone loves a good old walled garden, right? Okay, so let's start from the bottom and work your way up. What does that look
Yeah.
like?
So level one is your CSV or your Excel exports. Almost every system has a basic export button somewhere. So you click export to CSV or download Excel, and boom, you've got your contacts, your invoices, your transactions in a spreadsheet that you can now do something with.
So I actually do this a lot because I'm sure I've talked about it before, but I love Airtable as a
Mhm.
database tool, and I have probably 50 old CSV files that I've exported from Airtable sitting on my desktop as we speak that I've downloaded, but I've never actually looked at or done anything with. So this is one that is close to my heart.
Yeah, exactly. And the pro with it is that it's easy, right? No coding, no technical setup. Most systems make it pretty easy to get your data out. The con is it's completely manual and again, doesn't scale. So you're basically taking a snapshot of your data at one point in time. And then if you forget it, it's effectively lost.
I like that snapshot concept because it's actually incredibly important from a business perspective because there's no
Hmm.
real-time updating. There's no, you don't have a current picture. You only have what happened at that moment in time when you downloaded the file. So if you need to update it, you either have to download the most recent version or you have to update it manually. And I've worked in business environments where that's the case, and it causes endless problems because you need that real time
Hmm.
information and you don't have it. That being said, it's a great way to get structured data out of your systems quickly. For better or worse, most of us are familiar with Excels and CSV files. Everyone's worked with them at some point in
Hmm.
their career. So if you do export your data and you provide that to an LLM or to an AI, you can get your answers pretty quickly. It just might not be the
Hmm.
most current version. What's the second on this letter?
The second one is API endpoints. Again, this is a very technical term. It stands for Application Programming Interface. You may never need to know that, but you learn something new every day. So, in plain English, an API is a documented doorway into your system. Again, these are systems like your HubSpot, your Salesforce, those type of SaaS tools that answers very specific questions in a predictable, structured format so humans and computers can speak to each other. So instead of you downloading a file, a system can ask, give me yesterday's orders or give me all of my orders. And the API is going to return exactly that securely, on demand, and in a structured way that you can then start to parse out.
So a good example of this is if you use something like an invoicing tracking tool like Xero or QuickBooks or whatever, the tool will talk, and I'm doing air quotes around that. The tool will talk to your bank and pull your bank transactions via an API so you can view all of them in your tool rather than having to go into your bank account and check all of those. The way that I kind of mentally think of it is like a hallway almost. So you've got your, invoice tracking tool in one room and you've got your bank transactions in another room, and the API is that hallway that connects the two so that you
Mm.
can easily communicate back and forth. It's just a really clean way for systems to talk to each other and ask each other for data without me having to download a CSV file every week.
That's a great analogy. I love that actually. Also think of it maybe if there was like a bouncer at each doorway, right? So
Yeah,
that you actually
that's actually a good point.
so
There's all
you have to add your credentials to make sure that you're allowed to access it.
Yeah, there's
Um,
there's
and there
security in place.
Mhm. And there are two common patterns. So you usually have a pull via API. So your reporting or AI workflow calls the API either on a schedule or on an ad hoc basis and fetches the data, pulls it in. Or you can push it via what we call webhooks. Webhooks are just, think of them as event triggers. So when something changes in one system, like a new customer or you have an updated invoice, it's going to push that bit of data to wherever you've told it to go, right away, as soon as that new thing or that update happens.
Exactly. So if you think of the pull via API, it's basically every day at 8 a.m., all of your bank transactions show up in your tool. Or it could be that you only get your bank transactions when you've made a new transaction, and that's a webhook. So that's just the
Mhm.
the way that you can think of it.
Yep. And those are great examples. Most modern applications today integrate with each other in some way using these two patterns underneath the hood, either that, pull from the API or that push via the webhook. Your job is usually just turning the integration on, and kind of matching, or as we like to say, mapping the fields, and then setting basic rules of, what to send, how often, and who's allowed or what type of data is allowed to go across. So this structure is reliable, it's auditable, which is very important, and it scales better than the periodic ad hoc CSVs that you're pulling down manually.
Yeah. And I wanted to clarify quickly what you mean by mapping. It's basically the nerd term for the process of matching fields from one database to another. So just making sure that all of your columns match. If you've ever uploaded a CSV file to a CRM tool like MailChimp or something like that,
Mhm.
you'll have done this. It's just making sure that your emails don't end up in the column that says first names. But sorry, back to what you were saying. So APIs for scheduled pulls, webhooks for
Mhm.
event-based pushes, and a lot of tools support both. And you generally, as you said, don't need to think about this. It's all happening behind the scenes. This is mostly just laying the groundwork for you to understand more of what we're talking about. What's level
Exactly.
3?
Yeah, so level 3 is the new kid on the block, and we call it MCP, or Model Context Protocol. Now, this was all the buzz a couple months ago,
Yep.
and it's kind of died down a little bit because I think people are realizing, oh, this is really early. We got to figure this out. But
Yeah.
think of it as an emerging standard that lets AI models securely access live data from your systems.
So instead of just me using a spreadsheet or an API to get the data out and feeding it to the AI just goes and gets it directly.
Yeah, it's like an AI native API. So let's say your AI assistant could query your CRM like HubSpot, your project management tool, or your accounting system like QuickBooks, but in real time without you exporting spreadsheets or having to wire up custom connectors via those API endpoints every single time you want to do something new.
Yeah. So let me reframe that for our listeners, because with regular APIs, you still have to build bridges yourself. So like you still have to set up that Zapier workflow or,
Mhm.
connect your Airtable to your Slack. The analogy that a lot of people have used for MCPs is that it's more like a USB-C for AI. So it's a standardized plug and play, and it works with everything. So instead of needing, a million different cables for every single device, you just have one universal connector. And I think we
Mhm.
all know what a nightmare it is to have 50 different cables with different USB connectors. I currently have a drawer just full of cables that I'm not using at the minute. So the MCP means that the AI doesn't need custom integration work. It just kind of plugs in and it knows how to communicate safely.
And I'm never getting rid of those cables, Jess, no matter how much you tell
Never.
me I don't need them.
I'm going to sit on them for the next 20 years.
You
I
never know
literally,
when you might need that cable for that
I
one thing that
just,
you had 10 years ago.
exactly. I actually did get rid of some of the cables when I moved because I was like, this is ridiculous. I don't even know what this is for. This technology probably doesn't even exist anymore. It was probably for my digital camera from 2005.
100%. I'll be very excited to get rid of my lightning connector
Oh,
someday.
fuck those lightning connectors. Okay. But here is actually one concern that I have, and that is if this AI has direct access, couldn't it pull the wrong thing, or even worse, could it change the wrong thing?
100%. That's a very valid question. I mean, that's with MCP, you're effectively opening a door into your systems. So if permissions are set loosely, AI could read or even write to places you didn't intend. So remember that story, I don't know, it was probably a couple months ago now, where the
Yeah.
SaaS CEO who lost a database when the Replit AI coding assistant executed the wrong command? That's the nightmare scenario where AI somehow deletes a database because you gave it the right controls to be able to do that.
And by write in the data
Mhm.
terminology, you essentially mean creating new data or overwriting old data. So all of this to say, an MCP definitely is not a set it and forget it thing. This is pretty advanced. And if
Mhm.
you look at setting up an MCP, you need to make sure that you've got rules, permissions, checkpoints. Like, really, you need to be airtight with all of this stuff just because it is a little bit more of
Mhm.
an advanced situation.
Yeah, and this isn't new. These type of security protocols are true for APIs, are true for anything, any type of system. But I think some people got a little bit excited with MCP and just started giving AI direct access without any of the guardrails, and that's when people started to get in trouble. Like they forgot their security 101 practices. Um, but because the protocol part of MCP includes role-based permissions, scopes of what you can and can't talk to, and then human approval steps. So you might allow read only access to this month's sales data, but block financial write access entirely. Probably a good idea, right? You can set it so that sensitive actions like deleting or updating records require explicit human confirmation. So, for me, who has in the past deleted databases, you never give
Yes, you
me
have.
access.
Nope.
You never give me the ability to do that. You don't
Nope.
want to give your MCP the ability to do that either.
Okay. So let me just kind of reiterate my understanding. So APIs today are built for developers. They're technical, they're picky, and each one's a little bit different. MCP, on the other hand, is built so that AI can actually understand what's available and how
Mhm.
to ask for it. And that's the breakthrough. That's the difference.
Yeah, exactly right. MCP wraps APIs in a standardized format so an LLM knows here's what data exists, here's how to request it, here's what I'm allowed to do, and here's the structure of the data that I'm going to get back and what it means. So this is kind of like no custom integration required.
So an MCP is like giving AI a menu that's really clear and consistent across restaurants. So I guess it would be like a fast food restaurant versus going to
Yep.
individual standalone restaurants. So instead of guessing what's in the kitchen, the AI can kind of see that fast food menu, pick what it's allowed to
Mhm.
order, and then that helps it stay within the rules.
Yeah, love that metaphor. That's perfect. Basically McDonald's for your APIs.
That's it. It's actually McDonald's context protocol.
Yeah, I hope we should trademark that. I hope that
We should
catches on.
trademark that. Okay. And just so people don't get carried away and kind of thinking that they need MCP set up tomorrow, where is it actually
Mhm.
at today?
Yeah, it's still really early days. Like I said, we
Yeah.
got really excited, and then people realized there were some serious security issues that we needed to, figure out. So I've seen it being tested in a lot of developer tools and first generation AI assistants, but it's not being used everywhere just yet. But I think it will continue to grow over time as people realize its potential power.
As we're always saying, it's better to start small and test
Mhm.
on things that aren't, that sensitive before you go whole hog and go crazy and start putting it in anywhere or everywhere. But I think the reason to know about them and to care about them now is that this is the direction that a lot of things are heading.
And why MCP matters beyond APIs is that it makes systems work together like building blocks. And there's a lot of open source MCPs. So there's open sourced browser MCPs that allow you to interface with the internet, right? That you can create as like a little building block for your AI system that you're building. Or, if you picture an assistant that grabs live sales numbers from your CRM, checks them against unpaid invoices in your accounting system, and then posts a cash flow summary in Slack, all without writing extra code, that can be really, really powerful to get AI up and running on your data. The practical advice in this is start small with CSVs to export your data, move to APIs when you need scale in a repeatable format, and then start to explore MCP once you're confident in your security and oversight processes and really want to try and unlock the value of your data.
Okay, so I've now gotten my data out of all of its various hiding places. Uh, what does AI actually do with it? So walk me through that process.
Yeah, I like to think of it in 4 steps. So we're going to give you like another framework here. So ingest, understand, analyze, and then you can act on it. And the act piece is where we start talking about like agents and agentic and all that fun stuff. The first bit of that I is ingest and organize. So this is the behind the scenes stuff. Um, ETL systems. I know you're going to get me on that one.
I am.
RAG
That's a jargon.
systems,
Jargon.
data connectors. Basically, AI takes your messy, scattered data and gets it into a usable state.
Okay, so what does ETL stand for? What does RAG stand for? I'm gonna have a little buzzer every time there's a jargony term, and I'm gonna buzz the buzzer.
Sorry. Yeah, no, I think that's completely fair. So ETL stands for extract, so pull data, transform, do something with it, some calculations, and then load. Actually, throw it into your system. Then RAG, which we've kind of talked about a little bit, is retrieval augmented generation. So you think about it, it's retrieve, go and get data to augment your model. That's ultimately what RAG stands for. And it's how AI finds the right pieces of information from a large collection of documents to give the LLM that context that we stress so much.
So when we've talked about RAG before, it's been in the context of an internal knowledge base. So it's like an
Mhm.
additional way for the LLM to go in and find information about your specific business. Okay, so step one is basically making sense of the mess What is step two?
Yep. Step two, understand and summarize. So this is where LLMs really shine. They can read through thousands of documents, emails, transcripts, all that unstructured data that we talked about in the first part, and extract the key information. So here are the top 10 customer complaints from the last 6 months. Here's what your team discussed in that 3-hour strategy meeting. Basically pulling the text and then using pattern recognition to pull that information out.
I actually used this last week because I mentioned I'm working on a pitch. It had a lot of data about small businesses, so I dumped all of it into Claude, and I can now ask it to find specific stats as I need them.
Well, it's a perfect example because, again, we talk about that at scale component. You're never
Yeah.
going to be able to break all of that down yourself and really use it. But LLM is great for that. Step three is analyze and then predict. So this is where machine learning models detect patterns and forecast outcomes. And remember, LLM is just a giant pattern recognition tool. But they can look at your sales pipeline and predict which deals are most likely to close, or analyze your support tickets to predict when your team is going to get overwhelmed or when a customer might churn, something of that order.
So this is the fortune telling part of AI.
Fortune trying part of AI for sure. But it's fortune telling based on patterns in your actual data. So not a crystal ball. But step four, act and automate. This is where AI now takes action based on what it learned. So it might draft follow-up emails, trigger alerts when something's wrong, detects an anomaly, or even adjust pricing automatically.
So give me a concrete example of all of these steps working together, because I think that's really important.
Yep. I'll use an example for a consulting firm. So step one, AI ingests your data from the CRM, from your project management tool, and from your email. So you got 3 good data sources here. Step two, it understands that your client has been sending increasingly frustrated emails, and they can see that the project is behind schedule. Step three, it's going to analyze the patterns and predict that the client is at a high risk of churning based on other clients who've gone through similar issues and seen similar sentiment. Lastly, step four, it automatically drafts a proactive email to your account manager suggesting a check-in call or scheduling a meeting automatically to discuss some of these issues. This is kind of like a very nice chained agent to go from analysis to action.
This is every consulting company's dream, because honestly, this would be a godsend. Everyone's terrified of client churns.
Yeah, I mean, there's an interesting conversation to be had around consulting, right, in an AI world, but
Well,
we'll get to that another
yes,
day.
there definitely is. Some of the big four should be shaking in their boots. Let's put it this way.
Here's another example that might hit home, but financial transactions. And this is maybe more on a personal level or can be at a business level. So step one, ingest all your transaction data from your accounting system. Step two, you can understand normal spending patterns. So look at your trends. When do you typically spend money on which day? Step three, analyze for anomalies. So what are expenses that are coming in that are abnormal relative to all of your historical data? And so step four, automatically flag suspicious transactions for review going forward. You might be able to save quite a bit of money by identifying things that aren't supposed to be there, or starting to build patterns and behavior that's going to cost you money when you're not using something.
And it's not just about making your life easier. It's about catching things that you might miss as well. So like, think of all of those subscriptions that you forget about that it can remind you of, and you suddenly realize you're spending, $100 a month on subscriptions you shouldn't be spending that much money on.
On all those AI tools that we constantly talk about.
Oh my God, all those AI tools. But this is what banks do to detect fraud, right? Like, this is what we're talking about when we say that AI has been around for a while. This isn't new. It's just probably a little more sophisticated now.
Exactly. It's the pattern recognition component, which humans are very good at in smaller samples with less information. And AI is less good at kind of that smaller bit. It needs more data. So where AI or machine learning shines is in doing it over large amounts of data in batches we would never be able to understand and make sense of. And just as you rightly pointed out, this has been happening for a long time. Where the new AI starts to get really interesting is now, what do you do with it? You can actually start to make actions on top of that. So AI isn't just going to save time. It can surface insights that would be impossible to catch manually, and then gives you a way to go make an action and go fix it all within the system.
So Kyle, I think a lot of our listeners are probably thinking, but I don't actually have that much data. And the more that we talk about this, the more I hope that everyone realizes that that is actually probably not true.
You're absolutely right. Most business leaders have no idea how broad their data landscape actually is. They think data means those spreadsheets and the reports. That master spreadsheet that we talk about. They think that's their data, but it's so much more than that. And I hope this conversation we have kind of starts to get you to think about that.
Okay, so this has all been fascinating, but I think we need to get into the practical side of things now. How does understanding all of these data types actually translate to business results?
I hope you're not being sarcastic on that one, Jess.
No, of course, it's been fascinating.
Okay, well, here's the breakthrough though. When you combine different data types, you can finally connect business efforts to outcomes. So many businesses operate on gut feeling. I think our campaign helps sales. AI, when you combine all these different data sources together, can really start to prove that.
So, as an example, let's say that you run an email campaign and, traditional analytics will tell you your open rates and your click-through rates, and that's structured data from your email platform. So that is reading it from your email platform. But then the AI can connect that to your CRM data, your internal data, your website behavior, your actual purchase data, even, a support ticket after purchase. And all of a sudden you're seeing the full
Mhm.
journey and you're also seeing the full picture. So instead of just 30% opened the email, which kind of exists in a silo. It's not that useful of a piece of
Mhm.
information. If you turn that into 30% opened, 10% visited the product page within 2 days, 3% purchased, and these customers have 20% fewer support tickets, that's actually giving you a much bigger, much stronger picture. So you can say, okay, well, 30% opened, what caused that drop off? What could I potentially look at? Because why isn't it, 20% then visited the product page? It just gives you a much bigger picture to be able to look at how your customer interacts with your business.
Yeah, it's that why. When the
Yeah.
word that you use that's so big on that is the why. You
Yep.
you understand, okay, 30%, but why was it 30%? AI is
Yeah.
really going to help you do that, analyzing the unstructured data. And I think the real power move is mixing historical patterns with then real time triggers. So AI can learn from your past data that customers who don't log in for 10 days are likely to churn. But it's also watching right now, flagging at risk customers. So you're like keeping that kind of monitoring system going so that when it hits that trigger, when people are likely to churn, you can act immediately and do something, reach out to them, schedule a call, check in and see how they're doing.
So instead of you do that in real time rather than waiting for that quarterly business review where you find
Mhm.
out, what went wrong 3 months ago and you've already lost those customers.
Yeah, that 3-month meeting is about how they're churning or they're already churned, right? Where you needed to figure that out 3 months ago. It really, you go from retrospective or reactive to proactive. When you mix in that unstructured data, customer feedback, support conversations, or employee suggestions on your product roadmap, AI can tell you not just what's happening, but the why. Okay, I think one really killer example on this is pricing optimization.
Mm.
So AI can analyze your sales data. It can scrape competitor prices from their websites, maybe looks at customer reviews mentioning price, support tickets about cost, even weather data if you're seasonal, like if you're a retailer.
Hey,
It find
that was a big thing for cinemas, right? Back in our cinema
uh,
days. In
exactly
in the
100%.
UK, you see spikes when it rains because people go to the cinema, whereas in the US, it was different because people would go to the cinema for the AC in the summer when it was hot. So you would
Oh,
always
that was the
have
classic one, right?
that was the classic
That was
one,
what
exactly.
that was what drove Aquaman opening weekend in Entourage. Yeah, no, but that's a great example. AI can find the sweet spot where you
Yeah.
maximize revenue without hurting customer satisfaction. And this can really help you increase revenue in double digit levels just by letting AI adjust prices based on those patterns.
So a really interesting real world example that I've seen on this is Walmart. They've really transformed their inventory management using extremely advanced AI systems that analyze sales trends, seasonal patterns, local events, and
Mhm.
again that weather to be able to forecast demand with really high levels of accuracy. And then this technology then enables Walmart to maintain in-stock levels. Okay, Kyle, so we threw a lot of information at our listeners today. So,
Mhm.
and I think that they can see how it's useful, but I think everyone might also be a little bit overwhelmed because it was a lot. So let's give them some
Mm.
really quick wins that they can try this week. What can I actually do tomorrow that will help me with my data?
So, three simple actions you can take right now. Make your data inventory. So, grab a piece of paper, open your note app, however you list stuff. List everywhere your business information lives. Your CRM, your email, your accounting software, Google Drive folders if you use that. What's your customer support system? Think through every tool that you pay for or you use all throughout the business. And next to each one, write, is it structured data? Is it semi-structured data? Is it have unstructured data or a mix of the two?
So you could put like CRM is structured data, your email is unstructured, that that Bible spreadsheet that you've been using for years that might have gotten a little messy over time, that's probably going to be semi-structured, that sort of thing.
Mhm. Yeah, and I know that we have integrations. So, your CRM usually tracks your emails. And so there's a little bit of confusion on which has which. Think about it really about where that data is generated. So, emails, despite the fact that we log them in CRMs, it's actually generated within your email client. So, focus on what the data is on that structure at the source. And I think most people will be shocked when they realize how many systems they have. I mean, you probably think, oh, I've
Yeah.
got like two systems. You probably have like 10 or more, right? So the second quick win is pick your biggest pain point. Is it sales forecasting, customer churn? Am I losing customers? Is it operational costs? My margin, is not what I would hope it to be or should be. Don't try to solve everything. Just identify that one key pain point or area where better insights would move the needle the most.
Yeah, I think we keep reiterating this, but focus beats trying to boil the ocean. Don't try and do too much at once. It's better to do one thing better than a
Mm,
million things badly.
exactly. And last kind of quick win, try to run one tiny experiment this week. This one I actually really love. So export your customer list and give it some of that data around industry, size of the company, who you're speaking to, and ask ChatGPT to segment them into personas and define your ICPs. If you haven't done this exercise before, it can be really fascinating to try to match up what you think your ICP is or your ideal customer profile versus what your actual customer profile looks like. Or another example, take your last 50 support tickets and have AI categorize the issues. Maybe you're seeing this similar trends pop up that you didn't really think were the issue. You could also upload a sales call recording to a transcription service and ask AI to find the most common objections. Where are you losing deals? That may be, you know, customers might be or prospects might be saying different things, but it all kind of comes down to maybe one overarching issue.
I actually did this last week because I took all of my newsletters from the last, I don't know, 4 or 5 months, however long we've been doing them, and we looked at trends to start
Mhm.
looking at end of quarter trend reports.
Perfect. And maybe the bonus tip on this is pick something where you already know the answer
Mm.
partially, right? You've looked at a small subset of data. Jess, you have your example. Maybe look at a wider batch of data using, AI. That way you can validate if the AI is actually finding the real insights, whether you agree with it. So if it matches your intuition and maybe finds things you hadn't noticed, that could be really, really valuable for you this week.
As we always say, human oversight, you can trust it, but always double check and verify.
Exactly.
Right, time for AI news of the week. So, Kyle, I know we talked about AI's environmental impact back in episode 7, which was our episode on ethics. Go
Mhm.
back and have a listen to that if you want to hear us go much more in depth. And obviously, the environmental impact of AI is very much a topic of discussion. A lot of people feel very, very strongly about it. But
Mhm.
Google have just released some actual data that a lot of people are talking about.
Yeah, Google finally released numbers on how much energy their Gemini models actually use at like a very micro level. So a typical text prompt, type something into Gemini, uses about 0.24 watt hours. That's like running a microwave for 1 second.
That really doesn't sound like very much. And is anyone actually saying AI isn't bad for the environment after all? Because you know that there are going to be people jumping on that bandwagon.
Yeah, I definitely think, you see some of that. And, if at very surface level, I would go, oh, yeah, that's not so bad.
Yeah.
But I think that might be the wrong takeaway here. So, first, this is only for text queries, right? Images and videos use way more energy, and Google isn't measuring those and providing that data.
Oh,
Second, this is
funny,
just,
funny that.
yeah, shocker. Second, this is just the median. So, longer, more complex queries are going to use a lot more power. So again, we talk about, giving it a ton of context. That's great for your answer, but unfortunately not so great for the environment.
But this is where OpenAI's new router system is actually quite useful because it will route
Hmm.
between the shorter answer and the
Hmm.
longer answer. Um,
Yeah.
and I think there's a bigger picture question too, because Google won't say how many queries they're processing daily. OpenAI has said that ChatGPT handles 2.5 billion queries per day. So if you multiply those smaller numbers by billions, it adds up pretty fast. That's potentially, I don't know, 300 gigawatt hours annually just for ChatGPT. So that's enough to power 30,000 homes.
When you put it in that type of context,
Yeah.
doesn't seem so great. It's not the individual query that's the problem. It's, I guess, the scale.
Yeah. And AI is everywhere now. We obviously talk about it all the time. That's everything from search
Mhm.
results to drafting an email, summaries, you didn't even ask for. And I think the real issue isn't whether you should feel guilty using AI tools. It's about the massive infrastructure
Mhm.
build out that's happening to support all of this.
For sure. So, what would you say is the takeaway for our audience, Jess?
I think your typical AI usage isn't going to break the planet, but understand that behind every simple AI action is significant infrastructure. So use AI where it genuinely helps your business or it's genuinely useful. Maybe don't generate 100 AI images just because you can. We've all been guilty of generating a silly one to send to our friends. Maybe rethink that or go back to the ethics episode. Each individual LLM has an environmental policy. Google's probably one of the better ones. You could look at that
Mhm.
Swiss LLM, which uses 100% renewable energy. So there are alternatives. It just requires a little bit of deeper digging.
Mhm.
Okay, so now it's time for AI gone wrong. And our last few versions of this have been pretty heavy. So I thought it would be nice to have a slightly funnier one this week. Kyle, what's making you laugh this week?
Yeah, this is a good one to laugh at. Taco Bell decided to put AI in charge of drive-through ordering at over 500 locations. And spoiler alert, it's not going well. it it's particularly. I mean, I don't know if you've watched some of these videos, Jess, but
I
these
was
are
gonna say
hilarious.
if you look at it on TikTok, if you look at Taco Bell AI or something on TikTok, the videos are hilarious.
I definitely went down the rabbit hole and
Oh
watched some of
yeah.
these. One of my particular favorite was someone was trying to say their name was Aaron, and it kept calling them Karen. And as anyone who watches the internet knows, that being a Karen is not a great thing.
The worst thing you could possibly be. But of course people are messing with it, right? Like that's what the videos are showing us.
Oh, as soon as people figured out that you could
Oh,
mess with it, customers all over are trolling the system by ordering ridiculous things like 18,000 cups of water, please. Which, honestly, I I kind of want to do that myself. Or ask for like 1,000 packets of sauce, right? These are free things,
oh,
but definitely, not what Taco Bell wants to give you.
the favorite one I saw was someone kept asking for Mountain Dew, and then it just kept asking, "What drink do you want?" And they just kept saying Mountain Dew, and it just kept spiraling. But if you're going to deploy AI to handle hangry, drunk customers at 2 in the
Yeah, I was
morning,
gonna say at 2 a.m.
you kind of deserve whatever chaos follows.
Yeah, I think the best part is even the Taco Bell's own CTO is throwing the AI under the bus. So he basically said, sometimes it works, sometimes it completely fails me. That's not the kind of confidence you want from your CTO handling millions and millions of orders.
No, this is actually something that McDonald's has already tried in partnership with IBM. So, Taco Bell just took a look at that failure and thought, hold my Baja Blast. We can do worse.
Yeah, and now they're scrambling to figure out when humans should jump in. So, which probably you should have figured out before rolling it out to 500 locations. This goes back to the strategy conversation with Sean, right? They're beta testing on actual paying customers, which, as anyone should know, not a great idea.
I feel like we can file this under the 95% of enterprise AI projects fail story,
Hmm.
because this definitely doesn't sound like it rolled out particularly well. But I think
Yeah.
the lesson for our listeners is, if AI can't handle "I'd like a taco," then maybe you should start with something simpler before you hand over the entire customer experience to a chatbot.
Yeah. Also, it's rolling out to 500 locations before figuring this out. Start with like five.
Yeah, for real. Well, Kyle, this has been such a helpful conversation. I know when I first started working with data, this is exactly the sort of thing that I would have loved to have heard.
I think the mindset shift that we're looking for is for businesses and owners and entrepreneurs to realize that they're sitting on that gold mine of data. Every email thread is market research. Every customer support ticket is product feedback. Every sales call is insight into your product market fit and what type of messaging works to sell your product.
Yeah, and I think the best part is you don't need some big expensive data infrastructure to get started. You can literally export a CSV file this afternoon and start experimenting with it.
Totally. Start small, but think big. So, focus on your business outcomes rather than some of these technical capabilities that we talk about. The data is there. Hopefully this episode helps you figure out how to pull some of that data out. And then AI is really the key to unlocking a lot of its value.
Right. So that is a wrap on today's deep dive into how AI uses data and how you can use AI to help you with your data. We obviously want to
Mhm.
hear about your experiments. If you try any of our quick wins, email us at hello@earlyadopter.ai. Remember, there's no E in adopter.
Mhm. And if you found this helpful, share it with another person, a business owner, entrepreneur, AI curious professional, just asking you, where do I get started? Anyone who's trying to figure out this thing, we're all learning together.
As a reminder, you can find us on social media at early_adopter on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, and LinkedIn.
And very exciting, next week we have another guest.
We
We're going to be doing,
do.
yeah, we're going to be doing more data talk, which makes me so excited.
You and our guest are just going to have so much fun talking to each other. I promise we won't nerd out too much, but this guest
You'll have to
is
keep us honest.
I will, but he is great
Mhm.
at taking very complicated data concepts and simplifying them, and he's worked on some super interesting projects, so looking forward to that.
So until then, thanks for listening to Early Adopter, where we help make AI your unfair advantage. See you next week, Jess.
See you next week.